Hello. Today is quite an interesting topic as we're going to be talking about prototyping and the steps that you kind of go through in order to go from concept to thing in real life. Because as much as we would like to think we are not perfect. And even me, and I'm happy, I'm not happy. I'm okay to accept that. And what that means is that even when we design something with the correct tolerances and with the right measurements, and we use all of our special fancy measuring devices like that, we have our calipers, our digital protractor, no matter how much we use these, shit happens beyond our control, and unfortunately things don't work well. But in this episode I'm going to talk about one thing specifically to kind of show you the process that I go through when I'm creating products and creating things for me to use when I go airsofting. It's no secret that I like to run a sidearm, but at the same time I find it quite difficult to know where to put it on my persons. I've had it on like a thigh holster, a belt holster, I've had it like on here, and I've never found something or some place where it feels really comfortable. Like trying to carry one of these around, it flops around, it's quite weighty in areas, and at the minute I haven't really seen anything on the market that fixes my problem or solves it. So I made it myself. And you might actually like this. Don't just bear with me, okay? It kind of seems a little bit silly at the start, but the more, if you actually, it makes sense. It actually makes sense. Trust me, it makes sense. So I thought to myself, where else can I mount a gun, a sidearm, that isn't like anywhere it's going to flop about and isn't going to get in the way? And the answer I came up to with was on my gun. So I decided to make a mount to put a gun onto a gun, and it worked. So here it is here on the front of my gun. This is the kind of like the extra, this is the holster now, and essentially all you do with your Glock is you just slide it in like that, and that's it holstered. So the benefit of this is now your sidearm doubles up as your forward grip, just like that, and it actually works really well. It doesn't fall out. You've got like, it's really solidly on there as well. It's really solidly on there, so you're not gonna like just pull it off. And yeah, I've designed it so there's plastic in front of the trigger, so no accidental discharges in there. And yeah, it actually it surprisingly works well, because now say you want to like drop down to your sidearm, all you do is your rifle comes down, you slide your Glock out, and then boom, and you can stay lefty if you want, or you can change your hand position and go to righty. Isn't that sick? Like, oh, it's so good. Oh, it's empty. It's empty. So essentially, this isn't the video talking about this specifically. I'm going to do another kind of video where I fully talk about this this Picatinny Glock holster. But yeah, essentially, it doubles up as a forward grip plus sidearm. So yeah, I've done a right side printed version too. So if you wanted it on this side, you can do. That's for the lefties out there. Or if you'd rather, when you drop your gun down, draw it with your right hand, you can do that as well. But personally, I kind of prefer it being used as a forward grip as well. But anyway, that's the product. That's what I've made. And now I'm going to go through with you the process that took place in order to do it. So imagine like the idea's already done. We've got the idea, we know what we want to do. It's now time to try and make the thing. Have a look down here. So this is all of the stages that this kind of holstery thing went through in order to become made. So first of all, I took the general dimensions, and then I made this little thing. And this is generally just to make sure that it fits onto the gun. So I did my measurements, made a few little tiny adjustments, got the Glock, and then just like that, I was pretty happy with that. It was a tiny bit loose, as you can see on there, so I know that I needed to make it a little bit smaller. But generally speaking, in terms of sizes, that was I was pretty happy with that. We then moved on to this stage, and I actually broke this into two pieces because I wanted to test some different pieces out. So you can see they're both numbered 2. And essentially what all this piece was I was trying to test out to see if a full length one would hold the gun. And this was the point where I was like, okay, that's solidly in there. That's holding it quite nice. So my measurement tweaks from the first one to this one did exactly what I wanted it to do. At this point though, I was a little bit like, do I need to have all of this? Is this necessary? Because all of the gripping is at this point in the gun here. So that's why I broke the bottom piece off and then started to play around with this idea here, because that's where all the tension is. If I just take this bit again and put it on, there's nothing gripping that. So all of that is kind of pointless. But this, that's where the magic happens. So we progressed with this idea. So 1 and 2 out of the way. We moved on to number 3. This was when I was planning on mounting it underneath the bottom of the rail. So say this is the M4. This is when I was planning on mounting it here. So that would have fit like this. And this was, again, like a test fit for the Glock inside this little hole. But also I wanted to test these angles to make sure they fitted right. Now, in terms of Glock sizings, yeah, I was pretty happy with that. Although it was a little bit tight and didn't go all the way up. I wanted it to fit into there. So that was a tiny bit too small. And this angle was incorrect, sadly. So what I did from that point, I then just printed out an angle to test fit that to make sure this would work correctly on the underside of my gun. And this angle actually worked out really quite nicely. It was perfectly aligned. So that was the angle we went with. And then after that, the 5th kind of step in this design process, we went to a full kind of concept. So the gun fit in there quite nicely. It wasn't as solidly in there as I would have liked. And I figured the reason why was because at the design here at the bottom, there's nothing holding it together, so there was a lot of flex, as you can see there. But I did try and mount it using some screws and whatnot that I got from before. And yeah, it just, unfortunately, I don't think that this was the future. And like the mount wasn't super strong. And that's when I started to think maybe there's going to be a different solution for this. And that was the point where I grabbed my M4 and just started to try and like essentially hold the Glock alongside it at different areas, like underneath it. Didn't actually feel super comfortable underneath. And then I held it to the side and was like, this actually feels quite good. Maybe there's something with this. So went back into the CAD and started to design a side Picatinny mounted one instead of like an underneath like key mod M-Lock type one. And that's what brings us to prototype number 6. For number 6 here, it was a left-sided mount. I got my measurements in there, and unfortunately, it was a little bit too small. As you can see, it was a tiny bit too tight. Didn't go all the way to cover the trigger, but at this point I was happy that I had a proof of concept because it did hold it in way too bloody tight though, but I could at least test it out and it felt really quite nice and natural. So on from number 6, we came to prototype number 7. Unfortunately, when I did my sizings, it was just a little bit too big. Like it held it in, but not as solidly as I would have liked to have done. So much closer to the final product now. I just needed to tweak my sizes just a little bit, which brought us into number 8, which was pretty much perfect. These internal measurements for the holder, absolutely lovely. And these are the ones that I've got on the final version, which I showed you earlier on my gun. There is still a couple of issues with this one, though. When I was holding it, like this bottom ridge was kind of like digging into my finger. And even though you didn't feel it too much when you were wearing gloves, it was still something which I'd not want to be a part of the user experience. The edges were all quite sharp along here, so I decided I wanted to round them off, and I didn't put the text on the side properly there, so I had to redo that. I also wanted to add some ridges in the bottom here, so then when the threaded screws come in, they don't go into like screwing into the plastic itself there. I wanted a specific ridge in there for that as well. Which then brings me to the final version, this one right here. So as you can see, it's all got a nice finish. Every corner is nicely rounded off on there. Nicely rounded, nicely rounded. There's only one pointed one, and that's down on this side here, but that's so close to the gun, it never actually like interferes with you. And I wanted to keep these bits quite sharp in that respect, just to try and keep that part of the holster quite rigid. You can see on the top, well, on the back side here, I've got ridges in for the screw heads, and also a couple of little ridges inside here and on that side there again for the threads of the screws, just to kind of rest in so it doesn't like keep chewing up all of the plastic. Inside I also added a little bit of round edging on there just to give it a little bit more of a friction grip on the gun itself, because the gun, it does have round edges, and with those round edges in there, it gives it a little bit more to touch on. And again, this bottom bit, I rounded off these corners here, so then when the gun is in there and you are holding it, there is enough room here that it doesn't touch your finger, so it's nice and comfortable. And if you do touch it, it's just a rounded bump instead of it being like a pointy corner. So yeah, that's kind of the whole process I went through creating this. I must admit, I'm genuinely really happy about this build. There's a couple of kind of things I want to do to it again now is, finalize the screws that are going to go in there and see if I can get a supply of those kind of on the way. And then also I'm going to print a load of these up in black, as I think that people will probably more prefer to have these in black than this brown color. I printed it in brown just because my gun is like a dark earth, and I think that this fits better than just straight black. But I think that it would probably look quite nice in black as well, just because the Glock is black, so that would probably fit together quite nicely. But yeah, so that is my Picatinny Glock holster for your rifle. It is going to be available on my eBay store very soon. I'll put a link below in the description to that so you can check it out. At the minute, it's purely designed for Tokyo Marui Glock. So this is the G18C. I'm fairly certain that along the Glock family, there is a huge amount of universality in there. Also with like WE Glocks and other brands, they all pretty much run the exact same. That's my Picatinny Glock holster for your rifle. I hope you've enjoyed that video there. Much more to come. I've got a ton of products here as well, which I want to start running through doing videos on, including this Dynatex Dominator grenade holster there. Very, very handy to have. Keep your eye out for that one, and I'll see you very soon.